Hello everyone, this is Al Spectral. Welcome back to the Land of Empires, and this is part 2 of my series of guides on the mechanics of the Land of Empires. And today I'll be talking about the Hall of Valor, and hopefully by the end of this video, you guys will be able to know exactly how the Hall of Valor works, uh, the percentage of troops that are fed in and out of the Hall of Valor, and ultimately how many of them are eligible for resurrection. So this page is a page that many of you may be familiar with, especially those who do a lot of fighting and who has full hospitals pretty much. So when your hospital is full, the troops that die after that will be sent into the Hall of Valor. Now, not all of those troops will be sent into the Hall of Valor. Only 70% of them will actually show up in the Hall of Valor. Now, to give a little bit of description on different components of this screen, we have the total loyalty regen here on the top left. So this represents the number of troops you can recruit. Of course, different tiers of troops will cost different amounts of loyalty. Below that is the current loyalty growth, and this represents your current loyalty regen per hour. So under this page, I have a current loyalty growth of 1078, and that means my loyalty regens by 1078 every hour. Basic loyalty growth here doesn't really mean anything basic. It means your total loyalty cap. And this cap actually scales by your hospital size. So as some of you might have seen in the description, the Hall of Valor is 4 times the size of your hospital. And the basic loyalty growth I should say the basic loyalty growth cap actually also scales by your hospital size, meaning that the bigger of your hospital, the higher your basic loyalty cap is. Although sometimes, especially recently, the developers have actually gradually increased that loyalty cap, and actually just today, they doubled this cap. So this will show up as 42,000 instead of actually 43,000 instead of 21,000. And finally, we have the capacity. Now, this capacity represents the raw troop count, regardless of their tier. So 178,000 here represents that, tells me that I have 178,000 troops currently in my Hall of Valor. Now, as some of you may notice, every time a portion of your troops gets sent to the Hall of Valor, some of them will be immediately reclaimable. Now, this is actually very important to strategies involving sending troops to the Hall of Valor. Exactly. So I mentioned that there's actually a strategy component to the Hall of Valor. In long extended combat, you can use the Hall of Valor to your advantage in order to not consume too many troops or too many healing speed ups. And I'll be going over that later. And finally, we have the screen to the portion to the bottom right, and this is a summary of the total number of different troop types and troop tiers that are available for recruiting. Now, as long as you have sufficient loyalty, you can recruit them for free. So how exactly does the Hall of Valor work? I mentioned that when troops are sent to the Hall of Valor, or I should say when troops die in combat when your hospital is full, 70% of them get sent to the Hall of Valor. Now, why not 100% of them? Where does the remaining 30% go? And the remaining 30% are either reclaimed here or they go to the resurrection page. So what I did to learn about the Hall of Valor is that I tested with tier 1 troops. So I tested with 100,000 tier 1 troops, and this is a tile combat in the Battle Disorder, meaning that I lost 5,000 troops. So 5,000 troops got immediately sent to the resurrection page, and 10,000 troops got eligibly sent to the Hall of Valor. Of course, not all of them ended up in the Hall of Valor, as you would see in the next page. So how many of them actually ended up in the resurrection page? You can see the tier 1 troops. I have 7,300 tier 1s that ended up in the resurrection page. Now, I want to give a breakdown of that next, and hopefully I'll be able to explain all the percentages that is involved in the movement of troops to and from the Hall of Valor. So I tested with 100,000 T1s, among whom 15,000 got killed. Now, 5,000 of them are direct deaths because in tile combat within the battle disorder, 5% of the troops will instantly die, and 10% of them will be wounded. That means that I got 10% wounded from that fight, and all of them would be fed to either the Hall of Valor or the Resurrection page because I have a full hospital. Now, among those 7,300 troops, as you saw earlier in the Resurrection page, I have 7,300 T1s. 5,000 of them were the results of deaths, and 2,300 of them were the result of wounded troops, meaning that among the 10,000 troops that were sent to the Hall of Valor, 2,300 of them got sent to the Resurrection page, meaning that if you are fighting outside of an event where troops are eligible for resurrection, 2,300 of them will die instantly. So please don't fight, or at least please don't fill your hospital outside of a resurrection event, because you will be permanently losing a lot of troops. 23%, I wouldn't say 23%, but yeah, it does appear that you will lose pretty much 30% of troops that are wounded when you have a full hospital if there is no resurrection page. So 7,000 of them ended up in the Hall of Valor, and 700 of them could be instantly recovered. So going back to this page, we can see that 7,000 of them are recruitable from the Hall of Valor, and this represents 70% of the wounded, and 700 of them are immediately reclaimable. And this immediately reclaimable troops is actually an essential component of the Hall of Valor strategy, which I'll talk about in a bit. And so what is the Hall of Valor strategy? So now we kind of understand how the Hall of Valor works. When your hospital is full and troops get sent to the Hall of Valor, we learned that 70% of them are eligible for resurrection within the Hall of Valor. 7% of them can be instantly revived. And finally, 23% of them are eligible for resurrection under the resurrection page. So that is a comprehensive rundown of troop movement among those who get sent to the Hall of Valor. Now I will talk about the Hall of Valor strategy and why it is a very powerful component of Land of Empires combat when a resurrection page is present. So as many of you know, in the Battle of Disorder, it is a very extended combat period. We fight for a very long time there, and troops tend to die. Now the question you may have is, compared to healing the troops straight up, what is the efficiency if you had sent those troops to the Hall of Valor instead? So among those troops who are sent to the Hall of Valor, the way to recover them is to, of course, train them back. A portion of those troops will inevitably, well, I kind of say inevitably, but if you use the mechanic correctly, actually almost nearly no troops will die. So if you have a 90% resurrection rate, among the 10,000 that were sent to the Hall of Valor, well, that were fed into the Hall of Valor system, I can actually recover 9,770 of them. In other words, I can recover 97% of those troops that were fed into the Hall of Valor system, because I can instantly reclaim 700, I can eventually recover 7,000, and with a 90% resurrection rate, I can recover 2,300 times 0.9 from the resurrection page. Actually, if this was 1.0, you would actually lose 0 troops if you use the Hall of Valor system. Of course, once the Hall of Valor fills up, then I wouldn't suggest doing that, as you will see in a moment. But the key component I want to explain how to take advantage of the Hall of Valor system is to immediately reclaim troops that appear in this menu section. And this is important because if some of you might have noticed, across multiple fights, if multiple waves of troops are sent to the Hall of Valor, only the first wave of troops will be immediately reclaimable. So to give a quick example, if you lose 3 troops or if you lose 10 troops, and one troop shows up here, and then you go on to lose 50,000 troops. Well, you can say bye-bye to 7% of those 50,000 because this page will not change, will not update until you accept those troops. So the key factor to the Hall of Valor strategy is to immediately accept troops that gets fed into it. I can show you the difference if you don't immediately accept them. If you do not instantly recover, meaning that you just completely ignore that portion, then you, instead of losing 2.3% of troops that gets fed into the Hall of Valor system, you lose 9.3% of them. And this is a huge difference. If you are going to lose 9.3% of them, you might as well just heal them from the hospital. You might as well just buy or spend all your healing speedups because it is not worth the amount of speedups needed training those troops back. Now, the reason why the Hall of Valor system, or I should say strategy, is so powerful is if we were to look at a comparison of the cost between healing those troops versus training those dead troops back. So out of 7,000 Valor, so after all this example, my Hall of Valor capacity increased by 7,000, meaning that out of every 10,000 wounded troops, in other words, if my hospital was not full, I would have to heal 10,000 troops. So if we were to scale that number up to 1 million, which is slightly below my Valor size, I know most people's Valor size will be around 900,000, but let's just say your Valor size is 1 million. And I scale it up to 1 million, meaning that my Valor is now completely full. For example, no, not in this case, but let's just assume that my Valor is completely full. How would you compare training them back, training those troops who are permanently dead back versus if I had to heal 1.3 million troops? If I were to heal 1.3 million troops, then my Hall of Valor would be empty. But I would, of course, need to spend the respective number of speedups to heal those 1.3 million troops. So let's do a direct comparison. So the number of hours I need to heal 1.3 million troops, assuming this healing speed, which is a very good healing speed, is about 1,100 hours. And at 90% resurrection rate, the hours I need to train back the amount of troops, 32.8 thousand, is 332 hours. So it's actually more than 3 times more efficient in terms of speed up, in terms of raw speed up count, to train the troops that you permanently lose under the Hall of Valor system as it is to actually continuously heal those troops back up. And especially if you're not VIP 12, you cannot really switch from talent slot 1 to talent slot 2. So it kind of actually becomes harder if you are locked into the combat talent and you don't have the healing speedups. Even at 85% resurrection rate, for example, you cannot make top 10. You cannot make it into the top 10 rankings. It will still be more efficient to train those troops, to train those dead troops back than it is to continuously heal, continuously keep your hospital empty. Even at 80%, it is still almost twice as efficient to just let troops go into your Hall of Valor while continuously reclaiming troops that fall under this menu. So to give a practical example, when you're getting attacked in the Battle of Disorder, I would just spam click this menu as the march is coming in. Or when you're attacking someone else, I would just spam click and you will be able to reclaim a lot of the troops that die over the course of multiple battles. And this is really the essential part of the Hall of Valor strategy, because if you don't reclaim those troops, we can see that you lose 9.3% of those that get fed into the Hall of Valor. And suddenly, it becomes more efficient to heal them rather than to train the 9.3% losses. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about the exact formula for that controls the regen speed of the Hall of Valor. If you were to feed troops into the Hall of Valor, eventually it's going to fill up. And once it fills up, you really don't want to keep fighting, because the only way to keep fighting is to just start emptying your hospital. You don't really have a choice anymore, because if you keep fighting, what happens is that this will disappear. And this will disappear, meaning that 100% of the troops that are sent into the Hall of Valor system are directly sent to the resurrection page, meaning that now instead of the above equation, you have 10,000 times, or even less than that. You might only have 93% of them. You might only have 9,300, which is what I would predict, times 0.9. And this is really bad because you end up with something like what? Like 8,330 or something like that. And this is like a 17% loss. And this is really not something this is not really where you want to end up with if you're in an extended fight. After your Hall of Valor fills up, you would want to start healing and not continuously send troops into the Hall of Valor system. Now, after the fighting is over, of course, you want to empty your hospital to let the regen speed work at its maximum potential. And now I just want to spend a few minutes talking about the factors that control this regen speed. Now, this regen speed will never be higher than the maximum regen speed, which is the basic loyalty growth. And below this page is the approximate formula that controls how quickly your loyalty regens. And this formula, it looks a little complicated, but it's actually really straightforward. So as your capacity falls under each threshold, your regen multiplier changes. Meaning if your current capacity, for example, is above 80%, then your current regen multiplier is 1. If your capacity falls between 60% and 80% full, then your regen multiplier gets lowered. It's multiplied by 0.7% instead. And if your capacity is really low, as it is here, it is under 20% full capacity, then the regen multiplier is 0.1. But why is my current loyalty growth less than 10% of my basic loyalty growth? And that is because my hospital is actually full. The hospital is another multiplier that is expressed by 1 minus 0.5 times the hospital ratio. And if you have a full hospital, for example, the hospital ratio will be 1. So 0.5 times 1 is 0.5. 1 minus 0.5 is 0.5. So you have an additional factor of 0.5, meaning that you have 0.1 times 0.5, which is 0.05. So 1,078 is 5% of 21,000. And that is the lowest ratio at which your loyalty will grow. So you are guaranteed that your loyalty ratio will never fall below 5% because you require the minimum capacity threshold as well as maximum hospital capacity. In other words, a full hospital. And finally, the constant here is a function of current capacity divided by total capacity minus current loyalty divided by total loyalty. And the takeaway here is really there's no point letting loyalty grow to the maximum bar. You can reclaim troops at any point in time, and it will really not affect your loyalty growth. The only time where it will affect your loyalty growth is if you reclaim your low tier troops first, for example. And I don't even think that will have too much of an effect. But if you reclaim your lower tier troops first, then you will have essentially much lower capacity than you should have. Some people might try to feed a bunch of low tier troops like tier 1 troops, like for example 500,000 tier 1 troops into the Hall of Valor, and that will allow him to quickly reclaim the higher tier troops. But really, I don't think that is a very good strategy, because in extended fights, you should be taking advantage of your full capacity size to feed as many troops as you can into the Hall of Valor. And to take most advantage of the Hall of Valor strategy is to have a decent number of troops. I wouldn't recommend anyone with under 1 or even 1.5 million troops to do this, because after the battle, you will have a very inconvenient time doing your daily tasks, and you will have a very skewed troop distribution, especially in, for example, Season 6, where you would like to run infantry heavy. instead of a more balanced composition, you will end up with very few infantry, and that might very well affect your fighting performance. So this is more of a strategy for people with well over 2 million troops. And in my opinion, it is a very powerful strategy to obtain a 3 times more efficient trade-off in terms of how many overall speed ups you need to use to get back those troops. So I hope everyone enjoyed my Hall of Valor guide. The next technical guide would likely be on the battle mechanics. I think it is finally time to talk about how the battle mechanic works, and I look forward to making that video.